Because Aussie rock, I feel, is some of the best in the world. I'm not going to say if I feel Aussie is better than UK or UK is better than Europe, etc., because we have hundreds and hundreds of bands on our labels from all over the world. Great week. Lots of good feedback again. Thank you everyone for the support. We've done some great things this week. A lot of good podcasts, hard rock show, Scars and Guitars. It's been fantastic. But this week I want to talk about not something that's controversial, but I want to talk about something that's like an age-old dilemma in rock and roll. What are the things that have gone on in rock and roll that people go, well, what if? I'll give you an example. Would Back in Black have sold 40, 50 million copies if Bon Scott was still alive? Highway to Hell sold 2 or 3 million copies around the world, so they were on their way to being huge in 1978. But Bon Scott dying propelled them to the stratosphere. So would that have been as big an album if he would still be alive? Those rock and roll anecdotes, those old questions in rock and roll, what does it mean? And I'll throw another one at you. Where are the best rock and roll bands from? The UK or America? Now, I'm going to do a whole other episode on Europe and Australia, etc., because Aussie rock, I feel, is some of the best in the world. I'm not going to say if I feel Aussie is better than UK or UK is better than Europe, etc., because we have hundreds and hundreds of bands on our labels from all over the world. In fact, I would put it out there, if someone could please tell me another Aussie international independent label that has as many diverse countries as Golden Robot does on their roster. Israel, South America, South Africa, Japan, Croatia, France, Germany, Europe, America, Australia, you name it, New Zealand. Are we the most diverse rock and roll saviours out there at the moment? I reckon we are. So I put it to you, UK or USA, who really had the most influence? So Led Zeppelin, and it's an interesting fact, a lot of people think Led Zeppelin from America, and you might be listening to this and go, don't be ridiculous, we know they're British. A lot of people think they're from America because they had huge success in America, which then they brought to the rest of the world. So you've got UK music, Rolling Stones, The Who, Bowie, Led Zeppelin, the Sex Pistols, Pink Floyd, The Police, The Clash, T-Rex, Fleetwood Mac, Black Sabbath, and I particularly like the Dio years, Roxy Music. Then you've got the US rock and roll, Aerosmith, Lynyrd Skynyrd, the Eagles, Van Halen, Creedence Clearwater Revival, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, The Doors, The Cars, Cheap Trick, and of course Motley Crue. So who had the most influence and what era did they have the most influence? My personal opinion, at the moment I'm going to keep to myself because this is going to be an ongoing rant and discussion. And I'm not going to jump on here and say that I think the Crooks in the UK are better than the Wild Street in America, or Ghost of Sunset in America are better than the Scutlers, and or Gilby or LA Guns or Cicada Stone or Stone Trip, Stone Deaf. I could bury myself in this. I love all our bands 100% equally. I think they all bring something to the international rock and roll scene. However, if you go back a little bit and you think, what's the most influential bands of all times? If you go back to the UK and you look at when the Stones, 60s and 70s, Stones, Zeppelin, Who, etc., was that more influential? Was that more, did it influence more in those days than, say, Britpop did in the 90s? Oasis, Blur, Stone Roses, Smiths. What era do you reckon, and I'm really interested in the comments on this, what era you reckon was the most influential in the UK? And then we go to America. What was the most influential? If you look at the American bands coming through the 70s, I mean, I love Steely Dan, I love the Doobie Brothers, I love all those sort of middle of the road rock bands. Even let's look at today, who's more influential? The Strokes, Greta Van Fleet, any of the big bands. I mean, Guns N' Roses is still one of the biggest bands in the world, but who is the most influential and where are they from today? I think it's a really, really interesting question. And I put it to you like this. You go back to 1988, the three biggest bands in the world, U2, Irish, In Excess, Australia, Guns N' Roses, America. So you had three bands at the top of the tree that were from all over the world. And I believe it can be done again today. I think some of the best bands in the world are from everywhere. But I'm really interested to see people's opinion. What's better, UK or USA, for this discussion only?